Hello and welcome back to Pin Drop Shop. I'm Jessica and today I'm going to show you how to get your points to line up perfectly when quilting. Okay, so here is one of the blocks that is finished and you can see all the points are lining up as they should. And here is a block that is in 3 units that I need to assemble into a finished block, and we need to get all these points to line up, and I'm going to show you how. So we're going to take this piece and turn it upside down so these are right sides together. And now we're going to look at all the points where we need to make sure we have it how we want it. So this point needs to line up with this point needs to line up with this point, and then we have these 2 points here that don't have anything to line up to, but they do need to be in the seam. So that means the needle needs to run right over those points so that you're not sewing up here and part of this point is getting cut off, and you're not sewing down here so that there's extra white space where you should be going right through the seam. Okay, so we have 4 main points here, and we also do need to make sure that we are coming over here and cutting off about 1/4 inch of that corner and that corner with our seam that we are going to sew. So we're going to flip this over, put our pieces right sides together, and I'm going to focus on these 2 points that had other points to line up with first. So I'm going to start by lining up the raw edges, and if everything was perfect and we just sewed this with a 1/4 inch seam and all our other seams were 1/4 inch seams too, then in theory they would just magically line up, but that's just never how it works for me anyway. So here's how you make it happen. So we're going to take a pin and we're going to stick it right through here, and we're going to make sure it comes out right where that point is. Now I'm a little bit off to the side here, so I'm going to try again. And when you do this, you want to make sure that this seam allowance is nice and flat down. So we have that seam allowance down, and we're going to poke through and make sure we come up right in that point. Okay, and then we're going to take that pin and we're going to push it right into the other point where it needs to line up perfectly, making sure that seam allowance is flat too. Okay, so now the 2 points are aligned right where they need to be. So now we can just go like this, right? No, because that's going to shift it. When you make that motion, that shifts this top one that way. So we want to keep that straight up and down like that, and pinch all this together right along that, like it's just a post, just holding everything together, just like that. Okay, then you're going to take another pin and put it right next to it, like that. And another pin, making sure this is straight up and down, everything's pinched. I'm going to put another pin over here, like that. Now you could take this pin out and you could take a little pin and mark that dot, but I like to leave it in until the very last second, and I tend to get pretty good results that way. So now we're going to do the same thing over here. And sometimes these will be really bad and not line up at all, and it's okay. There's times where you might want to redo your block or whatever, but a lot of times you can make it work just by a little tiny bit of a stretch or whatever you need to do. Let's see how this one is. So we're gonna come in here, make sure we come out right in there. Again, I'm a tiny touch to the side and I want to be right on, so I'm going to try again. Right in there like that. Oops. The more precise you are in this step, the better chances you are going to have your points line up and not have to rip anything out. There we go, that one didn't want to cooperate. There we go. Coming out right in that point. And same thing, we're going to go down right in that point. Okay. Okay, so then we're going to just pinch everything right up against that pin. Take your fingers right up against that pin and just pinch that all down. Okay, and then take another pin, put it next to it. And on the other side. So that's all the pinning that I'm going to do. What I'm going to do next is take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to start sewing. Now see how my top unit is not as long as my bottom one? So if I were to line these up at the raw edges and start sewing, look where my seam would be. It would be right there. And that's not what we want. We don't want this half square triangle here, we don't want that to come right up into the corner, that diagonal to come right up into the corner. We need it to cut part of that off. So then what you're going to do is take this one and put the corner right, so the corner of the point is going right in that diagonal line that separates the dark teal with the white, and that's how you're going to line it up. So I will go ahead and put another pin there just so I don't forget before I make it over to the sewing machine. And then when we start sewing, we will do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but we'll be lining that up with this, not this. So some people get everything right the first time, maybe cutting everything perfectly, perfect 1/4 inch seams, but that's just not how I operate. And look, I can still get a beautiful block where everything lines up, so this is how you do it. And then same thing down here, when we get there, we just want that corner to line up here in the diagonal line that's created by these two half square triangles. Okay, so let's just bring all this over to the machine and do the next part. Okay, so let's start sewing this. So my 1/4 inch seam on my machine is this line on the presser foot. So I'm going to line that up with this top layer, not the bottom layer. I actually already started and I wasn't filming, so here we go again. So lining that line up right there, we're going to start sewing, and that's going to guarantee we get that part of that colored triangle cut off with the seam the way we want to. So we're going to start sewing. Okay, so now we're coming to our first intersection here, this point. So see here where this line and this line are intersecting, and that's the point we need to run over. So couldn't we just keep our seam flipped this way and run right through it? Well, the directions said to press the seam this way, and there's usually a reason for that. In this case, I think the designer wanted it to be more flat, and I think it will come out more flat if you do it the way she says to do it. So what I do in this situation is I fold it towards myself, and I'm just going to imagine an invisible line coming straight from my needle to that point. And I'm just going to start sewing towards that point. Okay, and at a certain point I'm going to get too close to it and I need to lay the seam back down. But I'm not going to lose sight of my invisible line. So my trajectory is straight towards that point. As long as I don't move anything or start going in another direction, I only have to go like 5 stitches and it'll go right through there. So we're lined up, we're just gonna lift, don't move anything. I have my finger right here to keep it down. Put that down, put the presser foot down, sew. And it should have gone straight through that point. Okay, so now here we're coming to this one. So this is our pin that went straight through both points, and it wants to just lay down, but I like to stand it up for as long as I can until I get right to it. I like to make it go straight up and down just like that. And you just gotta be careful that you don't, get hit by this stuff or any of the parts of your machine, but you should be okay. And then my seam allowance has come up here, so I'm just gonna lift that and press it down. Okay, so we need to sew straight through that where the pin is going. I want to guarantee that those two things are lining up, so I'm holding this straight up and down. I'm pushing down right here at the base of it to make sure both layers are staying right where they need to be, and I'm going to start sewing. And again, I have that trajectory of my needle going straight to where it needs to go. I'm envisioning an invisible line. And I'm going to just leave it in as long as possible, which is now probably time to take it out. Okay, so I'm going to take it out, and you can still see the hole where the needle was, and that's the point that I need to focus on. I'm going to take out this first pin, since my needle is just about on it, and I'm just going to sew so that my sewing machine needle goes straight through that hole, and it's having some problems, so I'm going to pull from behind here just a tiny bit. There we go. Went right through it. And we're going to keep going. And it's just having a little trouble getting through all that bulk, so I'll just pull from behind a little bit. There we go. So now for this straight stretch, I'm looking at two things. I'm looking at whether this raw edge is aligned with my 1/4 inch marking, which it more or less is, but I'm also aiming for this. So again, just always have that invisible dotted line in your head. Your needle to that point is what's more important than whether your seam allowance is actually a 1/4 inch exactly. Because nobody's going to notice that. They're going to notice if your points are cut off. So we're just aiming straight for this pin that is straight up and down that I have in my right hand. I'm just aiming straight forward. I'm keeping it straight up and down as much as I can. I'm pressing at the base to make sure those two layers are just smashed right together on those points the way they should be. And you do have to be careful this pin doesn't go down inside your machine. I'm probably being a little bit more, this is probably a little bit of overkill, but if you want to guarantee they're going to line up, this is how you do it. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I can still see that hole. I'm about 2 or 3 stitches away from it. I'm going to remove my first pin. And I'm just looking right at that hole, and I'm making sure my needle goes right in it or over it. There we go. Perfect. And we continue. So as soon as you reach your point, you have to establish a new point. So we've reached that point. Now what are we looking to aim at? So we look under the seam allowance here. This is where we're looking to aim at now, where those two lines intersect. So I can see the point, and I can keep the point, I can keep that open enough that I can look in there. And I do also want to remember that this corner needs to be lined up with the diagonal over here. So I'm just going to hold that down. I'm going to keep looking right in here at this halfway open seam allowance so I can see that intersection. And I'm going to aim my needle straight at it. I'm driving straight towards it. So as long as I keep going straight, even though that seam allowance is flattened down, it should have gone right through the point. Okay, now what's our new point? Well, now we just want to make sure that we are cutting off part of this dark teal, and you know, that should, our stitch should be going through here. So now we're just going to kind of turn it this way and let our 1/4 inch marking on our foot line up with this top layer once more, just like we did at the beginning of the stitch. So you can see I am not just going with a nice straight line with a 1/4 inch seam. My pieces are quite wonky, quite consistently, and that is okay. I can still get lovely points that line up. Okay, we're gonna cut, and we're gonna see how we did. So when we open this up, look at that. Perfect there. Went right through there. Good and good. Good and good. Everything that we wanted to happen has happened, and it worked. Okay, so I just went over to the ironing board and I pressed this block, so now you can really see how well the points do line up perfectly. So I'm pretty happy with this, and I just need to attach the other side to complete the block.